And we should be live. Hello, everyone. It's me, David Chen, on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/DaveChensky and also at patreon.com/DaveChen to discuss here, to discuss episode 1 of the new Marvel original series, What If, which just streamed on Disney+. I got my words mixed up there a little bit. Joining me for this is Dan Gvozden, the host of the Amazing Spider Talk podcast. We also recapped Loki and Falcon and the Winter Soldier together, and audiences asked for it, nay, demanded that we return in order to cover What If. And so,
what if we just kept going?
So, despite your best judgment, you decided, you know what? I'm going to stick around. I'm going to join Dave Chen. We're going to cover What If. So that's what we're doing here now. Just like the Loki show, what we did for the Loki show was we recapped it live on YouTube every week after the episode aired. We spoiled everything through that week's episode. We didn't spoil anything from future week's episodes, although we might hint at things based on comic knowledge and based on other things. And then the high-quality audio version of this recording is going to be available to patrons at patreon.com/DaveChen. So if you're a patron at patreon.com/DaveChen, you'll get it in your podcast feed. And otherwise, you can watch it here on YouTube. Also, a fun little YouTube feature, Dan, I turned on for this episode and for moving forward is super chats and like super stickers and all those things. So like if you want to reward us monetarily with stickers and chats and all those things, if Dan Gvozden drops a major insight and you're like, oh my gosh, that's incredible, or if I say something that is so profound, you're like, I got to open up my wallet, then super chats, super stickers, all that stuff, you can do that now in the chat, and we will see it and we will highlight your comment in the episode. So a little bit about what is happening here on the show. So, Dan Gvozden, I have to say, you and I had quite a bit of debate about whether or not we should even do this, and not for the same reasons as for the other podcasts that we did, but because we just didn't even know if this was going to be substantive enough to warrant a recap show, like this What If show, right? Because it's not really, theoretically not canonical, right? It's just like these flights of fantasy, maybe. It might not even impact future movies. Who knows, right? But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think we came down on the side of, there's enough fun stuff here that we're going to do. We're going to try it, at least for the first few ones, and see how it goes. But yeah, I think, why don't we start overall with what were your expectations heading into episode 1 of What If, and did the first episode meet those expectations?
Well, my expectations for What If is kind of the same as like What If comics. Like they were always kind of for continuity nuts. Like just theorizing things. They're kind of a thought experiments on the writers' parts. And
why were they for continuity nuts? What does that mean?
Because they always reached like far back or like into a certain past to say like, let me rewrite this and see how it would impact the future of the Marvel universe. And so the fun of it is really seeing like how different it got from what we originally experienced in, I guess, like the Prime universe, if you will. So like most of the joy is really just seeing, comparing black to white, like one to the other. And so it's kind of all about like people who've, in this case, watched these movies 5 times, a dozen times, are in the comics case, read those stories or know them backwards and forwards to see something different about it or see how things might change, So I would say like these are often meant to reward people that know their stuff or their continuity. So that's why I would categorize it that way.
Yeah, and you are a continuity nut, aren't you? Like, aren't you the target audience then for this?
Yeah, I would say so. But I would also say like the What If comics are kind of the essence of disposable. Like I said, it's a thought experiment, and whether you want to go on that thought experiment or not is really what's going to determine your interest. Sometimes a What If might introduce an idea that people like enough that they spun it off into a series. Like I brought this comic. I own a lot of What If comics, so I wanted to show one. So I have the first appearance of Spider-Girl in a What If comic. Okay. And, this went on to spin off into like 100-issue series. So sometimes these things become a big deal. And I suspect that might be true of some of these things in the What If show. Like Captain Carter might become her own thing. We're already seeing toys, and we've been told that she's going to come back in season 2. So,
right. So she might become so popular, right? The character in the show might become so popular they warrant their own spin-off property, ride at Disney World, whatever, like some kind of franchise potential, even though it starts from the concept of a thought experiment.
Right. And, in terms of that, a lot of the thought experiments in the comics ended up becoming things that writers actually wrote into the main universe. So, for example, we're about to get this new Thor movie, Love and Thunder. There was a What If issue, decades ago, which was what if Jane Foster got the power of Thor? And then, 20, 30 years later, we got a comic that was all like a whole series of comics all about that. And now we're getting a movie out of that. So you never know.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, we don't know if the movie is going to follow that exact plot, right? But
I'm pretty sure that
it's probably at least inspired by the comic, right?
Well, yeah, so. But she's going to become Thor in the movie. It's like from all reports, like yeah,
you never know. You never know. Yeah. Reports are sometimes wrong. That's all I'm saying. I don't want you to have to put your foot in your mouth. That's all I'm saying, Dan Gvozden.
I don't think I'm going to on this particular one. But for example, like Spider-Gwen started in like an alternate continuity setting, and it was so popular, that design, that she got her own comic series, and then that expanded. It wasn't a What If story, but it might as well have been. So for me, my expectations for this series was, maybe we'll see some fun twists on continuity, and I tend to like the What If stories that take a big swing. There's a lot of them that are kind of safe, like, what if this hero went bad? And it's like, okay, yeah, I've seen that a million times before. But I like the ones where we get a real twist. It gives us some fun nods to continuity. And hey, you know what? You never know. Maybe this is the origin of something that's going to become a big part of the Marvel Universe moving forward. So, kind of worth checking in on.
So I was keen to see whether or not this would tie into Loki in any way. And I don't think it directly does, right? Like it does in the sense that it implies the existence of a multiverse, and that's kind of something that Loki does as well. And what's cool about the show, as you and I have discussed, is that it's often, so I have seen the first 3 episodes, but we're only going to talk about the first one.
Right, I've seen the first 3 too.
The episodes are all, it's not just like, hey, the whole universe is different, every conceivable aspect of the universe is different, and like we're plopping you into it. It's not really about that. It's more like, what if a single decision was different, and like how would that have rippled across the rest of the history of these characters? Right. It's very like sliding doors. It's like, if something was just slightly different, we might have had a whole different history of blank character. And so that's pretty fascinating. So anyway, all that said, the other thing that I am kind of interested in, and really in some ways desperately looking for, Dan Gvozden, is a show that doesn't have that many tie-ins to the rest of the MCU, because I want satisfying self-contained stories. I know that's not what people out there want. Like, people love the Marvel stuff that ties into the other stuff. But you know what? Sometimes I'm an old-fashioned guy. I like a glass of warm milk after dinner, and I like my stories to be self-contained and not depend on you seeing another movie to get the whole thing. So this show offers a potential opportunity for that, given that it's an anthology series and it's using characters that we already know and playing around with scenarios that we might be already familiar with. So,
sure.
All that said, those are a little bit of our expectations. Let's talk about this episode. What did you think of the episode? You thought it would be disposable and maybe there'd be interesting nuggets of good stories in there, but it's not like you're like, this is my most anticipated thing since Avengers Endgame.
No.
So given those expectations, what do you think of the actual episode?
Well, I mean, a part of my expectations too is that like I think superhero stories are told really well in graphic visual form. And we've gotten like into the Spider-Verse, which set a really high bar. So I was also really looking forward to seeing how the animation would, convey superhero stories. And the trailers gave me some worry. Uh, and I think I kind of walked out of this a little bit mixed, both in terms of the animation and the storytelling. I think this was a fine place to start on this concept. It introduces the what if concept pretty well, and it throws viewers in a pretty safe place, like a key moment in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that everybody knows very well. And so I think in that regard, it played it safe and gave people like kind of an iconic new character to focus on. But I think the story was it didn't really do too much with its concept other than kind of character swapping people. And I think the animation is kind of clunky. It's
Mm,
beautiful if you freeze frame it,
yes.
but when it moves, it looks like a PlayStation 2 video game cutscene.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of it just feels like a
PlayStation
rig.
2 is pretty rough. I
Okay,
mean,
yeah.
PlayStation 5, I can give you PlayStation 5.
Yeah, maybe. I think it's the animation. Like, I think PlayStation 5, like, now we've got actors that do motion capture and stuff for our video games. Like, I think the lighting in this is beautiful. The colors are great. But I just don't think it has a lot of the principles of animation that we expect to have animation feel like it's alive,
Mm-hmm.
squash and stretch, exaggerated movements. It feels almost like animation by algorithm.
Yeah, yeah,
And or like coding. And so it
right.
feels kind of dull, especially in dialogue scenes where the kind of like lighting and camera movement can't really save it.
I think that's a great point about the animation, which is it's kind of paradoxical, right, Dan? Like on the one hand, the animation looks great, but on the other hand, it looks like it was made in a computer, which like I think it was,
Right.
and many beautiful things are made in computers. So I don't want to like I'm not trying to be down on that, but I just mean like I think in the notes you write that it was designed. It looks as if it was designed using basic animation software, rigging, and lighting, rather than being crafted by animators. I think that's a great way of putting it. It doesn't look like somebody slaved over every single frame of
Right.
this. It looks like they designed like the Captain Carter model and they moved the model around a little bit, and then there's a beautiful background and the movement is fluid, but it looks kind of again like it was almost like it was made using like a pre-existing off-the-shelf template rather than like
Right.
something that was like truly original. So, but again, it looks really nice. Like it's not like it's bad. It just is kind of there's this tension there between those two ideas. So anyway,
Yeah, I mean, I would say like the coloring and the lighting of it often gives me like, especially when you freeze frame it, it reminds me of like the old Max Fleischer Superman
mm-hmm,
shorts. Have you seen
mm-hmm.
those before, David?
I think so. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they're incredibly beautiful, but like if you watch those, which I would recommend any of your viewers to check out, there's so much character in the way Superman moves, and I just don't think that is present in these shorts.
Arj Benel in the chat says the animation gives me the Clone War vibes, which I think is a great kind of
Yeah.
comparison. I think it looks better than the Clone Wars personally, but it's kind of like along those lines. So,
I wish that the line work in it was more expressive too. I mean, it just looks like kind of like thin outlines. There's
hmm
a comic artist named Mattia De Lulis who does this kind of style and makes it look really gorgeous. It's all about the colors filling in the work that the lines aren't doing. But in animation, I'm like, maybe I'm spoiled on Into the Spider Verse, but like I just want it to be more expressive.
all right. So the show is introduced by a character that we later find out is the Watcher, right? So tell us a little bit about this character and what his whole deal is. Voiced by Jeffrey Wright, who does a great job. If you want somebody to intone, ponderous statements about the nature of the universe. We've already seen him do a great job in Westworld, and I think he could do a great job in this show as well. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the Watcher.
Yeah, Uatu is his name. The Watchers are actually a like species of character, I guess. I mean, if you watched Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, they showed up there during the Stan Lee sequence. And Stan Lee was kind of sometimes people would joke that he was a Watcher.
Yeah.
And the Watchers are all like assigned their own universes to exist in and watch the events of that universe. They were introduced in Fantastic Four number 13 in 1963, but it wasn't until an issue called Tales of Suspense number 53 where we got like his race's backstory, and they're very powerful. Like if you're aware of the character Galactus, they're like even more powerful than him. They're like one of the most powerful beings in the universe, but when they were in their infancy as a race, they saw themselves as like shapers of the cosmic universe, and they got a little too involved, and because of them there was like genocide, and they wiped a whole species off the earth, and so they decided that they would never interfere with the actions of the universe ever again. They would just watch and observe. So they're pledged to non-interactivity with the events. Although Uatu is kind of known for breaking that rule here and there in moments. So he's currently dead, or maybe he's just come back in the comics. But yeah, he's like a guy that stands on the moon for the most part and just watches the events of Earth and the rest of the universe unfold. And he often shows up at times of like great conflict in the Marvel universe. So if you see the Watcher showing up, something really big is about to happen in the Marvel universe. And this seems to kind of go along with that. I mean, his visual presentation here is a little bit different. Here he looks more like a character called Eternity from the comics, which is like a person made of like, looks like he's made of the universe and star systems. I imagine we're going to see like a more physical Watcher maybe as the show goes on. But most of the stuff just remains very consistent. He's just a guy that watches and documents major events in various universes. So yeah, here he seems like more of a multiversal character, but yeah, and he's kind of operating here like the narrator, like Stan Lee used to do a lot of narration in like TV shows for Marvel, and I think here he's kind of replaced that role. So yeah, I thought it was exciting to see him, even if his role is kind of minimal.
Yeah. The design is cool. Love Jeffrey Wright. I'll be interesting to see how this character evolves over the course of the season. And I think one thing you're noticing if you're listening to this or watching this is that I think we're going to go a little bit more into the comics in this recap show than we have in like Falcon and Winter Soldier and Loki, because I think that's probably where the most interesting material is to mine for this show. So that's my suspicion. I mean, the episodes are really short and the plots are like fairly simple. So
yeah,
it's not like we're gonna like necessarily need to spend a lot of time breaking down what was Captain Carter's motivation here. Like I don't think we need to necessarily do that. All that said, as we discussed earlier, there is a single point in time in which a decision is made, and that fractures the universe and gives us another reality.
I really like how Uatu like points it out. Right? He's like, this is it. This is the moment. I think that's kind of cool.
I thought it's a little bit clunky to me personally. He's like, that's it. That was the moment. And it's like,
yeah,
I almost would have preferred if like they didn't tell me and then it let me figure it out somehow, but anyway,
I can see that.
Whatever. It's extremely minor in it. And so in this case, the difference was Peggy Carter staying in the room, right? That was the situation, and then somebody like goes on the attack, and then she stops it, and she's like, "We got to inject the drugs in me now, or else we're gonna lose all the research." And as a result, she becomes Captain Carter. They don't call her Captain America because she's not American,
and they don't call her Captain Britain because that's a different character that is actually involved in the multiverse in the Marvel universe. So, I imagine we'll see that character. Who like kind of works in the nexus of all realities. Captain Britain is like multiverse cops, the multiverse superhero in the Marvel universe, other than the TVA. So they can't call her Captain Britain, which might be tantamount to saying, "Well, we have plans for Captain Britain."
Mm.
So maybe get excited about that if that's a character you like.
I did like how the title of the episode is not like what if Agent Carter was Captain America? It's like what if Captain Carter was the first Avenger? It neatly sidesteps all of that stuff that you just were talking about, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty cool. So anyway, she becomes Captain Carter, and I think the design of the character actually looks awesome. Like it looks great. And the animation and the action scenes that she is in, she comes off as like a total badass. And the way that the combat works and the shield and all that stuff is very much in keeping with the spirit of what's in the Marvel movies. So I loved all that stuff. How did you think the character overall worked for you?
I really liked her. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not a big step outside of like what we've already seen in this universe. Like I wouldn't say she brings that much of a distinction from what Steve Rogers brought to that role. But I liked her. I think the design is really clean and elegant, and kind of the working of the UK flag in there.
Yeah.
I liked all of that stuff. I love the line when she first appears where he says, "You're not going to need your heels anymore," and she's like a foot taller than everybody. I mean, I thought that was a clever way of pointing that out. I like it. I mean,
It's cool that like you have all these associations of Captain America's outfit with Captain America, but they've showed that basically they could just retool it for the UK and it would work just fine. And I thought that's kind of cool. Like it's not a slam dunk that you could just redo Captain America's outfit for another country and it would still work. But I thought it worked great. So
for sure.
yeah. All right, a couple other things. First of all, Bradley Whitford doing a great job of basically playing toxic white males. Between Get Out and this, he basically is a great villain to root against, and he's just kind of over the top douchebag. To be fair, not necessarily out of sync with the times, but still just like kind of a raging asshole, and he does that really, really well. So yeah.
I liked how much this show kind of rewards people who are fans of the Agent Carter miniseries that we got several years ago. I mean, there's a lot of recurring characters here, and I didn't know there were a lot of people that were really big fans of that show. So this is kind of a nice, gift to them. In regards to Colonel John Flynn, the Bradley Whitford character, I do feel like it's one of the weaknesses of the episode is his critique of her. I mean, yeah, maybe it's accurate to the times, but it felt very flimsy and very thin, like girls equals bad. Like I would have loved to see some more nuances of that. Like,
Yes.
hey, we've got this all male army. It's going to be really hard to recruit people with a female captain, character,
Right.
or like,
and that's the biggest letdown of this episode for me is that the idea of a Captain Carter, like a female super soldier, is like, wow, that raises lots of implications and tricky situations that will arise from that. None of which the show actually explores, right?
right.
So you've pointed out one, like the politics of having like Captain Carter be in, one of the first super soldiers, the first Avenger, whatever. Another huge one that I was so disappointed was not explored was the idea that in this world, Steve Rogers does not become Captain America, right? Or he does not become a super soldier. And it's like, but they're still kind of like in love. And like, what is that dynamic like where she's a super soldier and he's still kind of weakling, even though like a noble dude? And the show basically just does away with that / is completely uninterested in exploring that at all. So
Right.
a lot of rich avenues went unexplored, unfortunately. Yeah, go ahead.
And I think it's unfortunate too, because if we're going to get this character returning in the present, exploring that in the past would allow us to explore the difference, of her showing up in whatever 2008, 2009, whenever that occurs in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, there's even more rich stuff to explore there. What is it like for a woman to wake up the next day and see gender politics changed to an extreme,
Right.
where she is now kind of like championed as like an icon, or experiencing tokenism or whatever it is. Like there's so many things that we could explore there, but by not kind of laying the groundwork here, you kind of ignore all that.
There's a moment when this is kind of funny when Steve Rogers says like, just be glad you're not Captain America. They would make you go on USO tours and smile at everyone, which is actually typically what many women were, not forced, but like were relegated to during USO tours, and I thought that was kind of an interesting reference to, it's like a nod to the place of women in that time. But I agree with you. Bradley Whitford is cartoonishly douchebaggy, and it misses this opportunity to explore this really unexpected situation with more nuance, and that's kind of a bummer. So, okay, what else happens in this episode? So there's a lot of now, Dan Gvozden, there's a segment that I wanted to do in this recap show that we're doing.
Okay.
And the segment is let's compare, or let's grade the voice actors and how closely they sound alike to their original actors. Okay?
Okay.
And this only applies for people who were not the same voice actors as their original actors. So they actually got a lot of the original actors for this episode, right? Haley Atwell plays Captain Carter. Samuel L. Jackson's Nick Fury. Jeremy Renner is Hawkeye. Stanley Tucci's Dr. Erskine, even. They got Dominic Cooper for Howard Stark. And they also have Toby Jones as Arnim Zola. So they got a lot of the original cast back in this one.
I wonder how many of them were like lines that were taken directly from recordings from the film,
right,
versus
right.
new things. Like, do you bring Stanley Tucci in for one line?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he recorded it into his iPhone,
Yeah.
It's like, we'll pay you like $5,000 to record one line into your iPhone.
Right.
Okay, but the two characters that were different were Ross Marquand, who plays Red Skull. Now, he's also the guy who played Red Skull in Avengers Endgame. So not Hugo Weaving, but Ross Marquand played Red Skull. How would you grade, on an A to F scale, how would you grade Ross Marquand's ability to play Red Skull?
I would say it's a B.
Yeah,
I mean,
solid B plus. I think so.
I think if I didn't know that, like, it wasn't what's his face who played him in Avengers Infinity War, I wouldn't really know. I wouldn't have second guessed it, except for that I know the politics behind that. They didn't want to return. Why am I forgetting that actor's name?
Hugo Weaving. Hugo Weaving.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, and also Timothy Mabley in the chat says, it might be worth pointing out Red Skull's design is based on the recast actor Ross Marquand, not Hugo Weaving. Marquand voices him too.
Right.
So that's one thing to remember. Oops, sorry, my phone fell over there. The other actor who was replaced is, of course, the guy who plays Steve Rogers. Now, in the movie, of course, it's Chris Evans. In this show, it's Josh Keaton. So on an A to F scale, what do you think of Josh Keaton playing Steve Rogers?
Well, here's how I'm going to judge it. I read an article in the Hollywood Reporter today that said, and Chris Evans reprising his role as Steve Rogers. So if you can fool the Hollywood Reporter, I would say A plus.
And the thing that's weird about it is Dan Gvozden wrote that article, so he just got it factually wrong. No, I'm just joking. No. So yeah, I thought he did great. I would give him like A minus, possibly even A. He was very, very good. Now, usually Dan Gvozden, I want to do this segment at the end of the episode, but I'm bringing it up in the middle of this recap episode because when Bucky Barnes is introduced, he is so terrible. Like, the voice performance in this show is so terrible. Like, I'm not joking. I could literally do a better job than Bucky Barnes did in this episode. And I don't have a high estimation of my voice acting ability. That's how bad it was. I was convinced, like, literally the first thought that went in my head was, oh man, the guy who they got to do Winter Soldier is awful. Like, he did such a crap job. Like, I can't believe they got such a terrible person. I was literally stunned to discover that it was, in fact, Sebastian Stan, who, by the way, is an amazing actor. Like, I loved him in I, Tonya. I thought he was great in Falcon and Winter Soldier, which is a show I did not enjoy very much. And so the fact that that was Sebastian Stan, like something went wrong in the journey from this show being conceived with Sebastian Stan being in this episode to the final episode, right? I mean, what do you think?
I mean, I don't know that I thought it was that apocalyptic, but it definitely stood out.
It was so bad, Dan. It was
the internet
atrocious.
is dunking on this performance so heavy. I just think that the lines he's asked to give are kind of lame in a show that like the animation's kind of stiff, like delivering comedy. I don't even know what he was like, responding to. But yeah, it's a bad performance. Where I want to lay the fault, I'm not entirely sure.
I mean, it's likely they're like, hey, you have one day to do this. He slept. He went on a bender the night before. He slept poorly. He woke up. He's like, oh yeah, this is today. I got to do all my lines for the what if, and I guess I got to record them in this custom voice booth in my home. But like, I'm gonna be pounding margaritas between them because I don't care about this show. It's just. It's really like, oh, like, they just did one take of every line. Like that is how it feels. I mean, I have done voice acting. I have I have been been a creative director of videos and commercials where I need to direct voice actors, and this is a terrible voice acting performance. Like, there's people who are paid $25 an hour who like put much more of their effort and energy into the voice acting than Sebastian Stan put into this performance. It is truly atrocious. Okay, we should move on, but I cannot get over how terrible it was. So anyway, Sebastian Stan gets an F for imitating Sebastian Stan for the movies. That's kind of where I was leading.
Fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
I think you were the voice of the people, so
Yes.
we had to make sure we got it in there.
Okay, so what essentially happens in this movie is kind of a interesting parallel to what happens in the first Avenger, right? Basically, they're trying to get the Tesseract. Peggy Carter goes and murders a bunch of Hydra soldiers, and they get the Tesseract. They break out the 107th, and then Steve Rogers shows up, and this is what was kind of disappointing is they wanted to still have the parallelism with Captain America and First Avenger. So, like, they need to have Steve Rogers in the mix somehow in order to do that. So he becomes like mini Iron or proto Iron Man in this episode. And if I sound disappointed about that, it's because basically they could have played more, in my opinion, with the dynamic between Steve Rogers and Peggy Carter, right? They could have, like, what is it like for him to, like, not be as strong? Like, would they still be into each other in that scenario? I'm curious. Like, explore that a little bit more, But again, the show doesn't do any of that. Instead, it's just like, oh, he's still in the mix because he has the
Hydra Stomper.
Hydra Stomper powers. So anyway, I don't know that we need to like recap everything that happens, but I guess, are there any highlights of things that you want to mention that occur throughout the course of the rest of the episode?
Well, I mean, on the back of you dunking on the Hydra Stomper, which I agree. I'm not
dunking. I'm just saying it's disappointing that they didn't use it's like, oh, when you watch this, you're thinking, oh, Steve Rogers is out of the mix, and then it's like, no, we're gonna get him back into the mix using basically a Deus Ex Machina that wasn't. I don't remember the Hydra Stomper being in the first Avenger movie, right?
No, the first Iron Man in creation is decades from now on that timeline.
But I guess because Peggy Carter stayed in the room, they have the technology now. So
yeah, I don't know. Or Howard Stark was like, "Oh, I've been looking to dust this thing out." Yeah, no, it doesn't make a ton of sense.
Maybe it's a commentary on how, because Peggy Carter exists and sexism is rampant. They're like, we can't have a woman out there kicking ass. We need to make something that makes a man comparable to her.
Interesting.
No, I don't think they did that.
I mean, but again, if they'd explored that would be really interesting.
Right. Maybe. But they didn't. So
I mean, it's also strange that like Steve is the one to operate it. Like why put Steve in that? Why not put like Howard Stark in that?
Yeah.
It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But visually, it's really cool.
It
Like
is
the
really cool. Yeah.
montage of them like taking down like German planes and her riding on the back of
Oh
the
yeah.
Hydra Stomper.
So badass.
Yeah, really fun. And
Really
it's
cool.
like if you remember Captain America First Avenger, most of the Nazi Hydra stomping stuff occurs in like a montage that really like he quickly becomes Captain America very, very fast and assumes that role almost like off camera. It's a like really splashy montage. And so I like that they did that here, at least in parallel the filmmaking of the original movie as well. So to me, that was a highlight. And again, any moment it goes into action is a highlight.
Yeah.
Like, Captain Carter showing up to fight the Hydra for the first time and flipping the car over her body is really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just a lot of really great action beats, in this, and I enjoyed all of that. I think the third act is where things kind of get a little bit boring to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like it stops being inventive with new ideas, and it's just kind of like a plot to, kind of rehash the original with a few new elements. There's a giant octopus monster that might be Shuma Gorath for fans of that character from Marvel vs. Capcom 2. But
They managed to combine two cliches of these kinds of stories. Not blue beam in sky, but blue beam in room, and giant octopus.
yeah. I thought the Steve's death moment was potentially like interesting in terms of drama. Like one of the things that these what if comics are notable for is that they tend to kill off characters left and right because why not? Because you can. And so I thought, oh, cool, we're going to have that same motif show up in the show where characters are just slaughtered left and right. Or in this case, I thought, well, this is neat. What if Steve Rogers becomes, the next Winter Soldier? What would that mean to have him in that role? But of course, he doesn't actually die. And so I thought that was like kind of a bit of missed potential to kind of mine that for drama. And that's the thing. There's a lot of drama that's missing here. To that proof, the one bit of drama I really like is this continual repetition of the are we going to dance? Are we going to dance? And that stuff felt like really kind of heartwarming to me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I could have spent a lot more time with that.
By the way, Langley M. Neely brings up the very good point. Like, they have the tech because they got the Tesseract early in this case. Normally, Stark didn't get it until finding it on the ocean floor after Cap was frozen. So,
that's a good point.
So maybe it does make sense that they were able to build Iron Man really quickly in this scenario. Fair point. And, if we ever bring up an unfair criticism, feel free to call us on it, and we'll acknowledge it. So apologies. That was an unfair critique. That is a good point. Sorry, did not make that. I actually made that connection when I was watching it. Didn't explain it while we were doing this recap just now.
Yeah,
so,
I think I connected, but it's been a few days now since I've
Yeah.
seen it. So
Yeah. All right. So anything else about the ending of this? You bring up there's this kind of parallelism between the train scenario, right? Like, in the first Avengers, there's that train mission. In this one, Bucky Barnes does not fall down and get his arm ripped off and stuff. And there's like a kind of fun reference to that. And so like that's a big difference, right? In this world,
right.
So we're making changes left and right. Bucky Barnes presumably does not become the Winter Soldier in this universe, right?
Right, which would then maybe mean that like Iron Man's parents don't get killed. And I mean, the interesting thing is like I as much as I kind of think that this episode's a little bit limp, I think the future for how this impacts the timeline is actually kind of exciting.
Yes. And we should also say that having watched episodes 2 and 3, this one I would say is the least interesting out of the 3 episodes, right? Like this one's fun. It's kind of like, oh, cool, yes, Captain Carter. That's kind of fun. And that's about where the enjoyment of it stops. But the second and third one, I think, are like much more interesting. So, and have far wider reaching implications that are interesting.
I think that this one has the most iconic imagery.
Yes.
Of the 3.
Totally.
But I think the other two, like, they play with the idea a little bit more, and I think that's by design. You know, like this one is introducing the idea to audiences that, you know, aren't really that familiar with it. And I say that as someone like I tried to watch Spider-Verse with my parents, and the idea of the multiverse to them is so foreign that like they couldn't get past that, you know, in the movie. So I think, you know, there is a bit of a learning curve for some audiences that aren't used to this kind of storytelling.
Indeed, indeed. All right, so let's talk about some of the stuff at the end real quick. As we already discussed, we're kind of bouncing around a little bit, right? But basically, there is a massive octopus because Red Skull activates the Tesseract. He gets squished by it. Red Skull gets squished by the octopus.
Yeah.
How did he die in First Avenger? Do you recall?
He gets like remember he grabs the Tesseract and tries to use it, but it like zaps him into the like into a cosmic space.
Mm.
And that's how he ends up on Vormir, the planet with the Power Stone.
It's funny that in any universe, Red Skull should not use the Tesseract, basically, right? Like
Yeah.
it's going to end badly for him.
It's a real shame because Red Skull is a really great villain, and you know I would love to see that character come back in like a bigger role. But I feel like because of the actors, maybe that's never meant to happen. Who knows? Maybe in the next Captain America movie with Falcon, we'll get some more Red Skull stuff in the present day.
Yeah. So then, as you write very articulate, or very eloquently in the notes, Carter gets a sword and starts cutting limbs while Howard Stark does science stuff.
Yeah,
Well
that's
put.
accurate.
And then she goes, and I have to say, Captain Carter with the sword like looks really freaking badass. I didn't know I wanted to see that character with a sword. She looks awesome, and yeah. So
That's
yeah,
what Captain Britain has, actually. He
got
has
it.
a sword that looks just like that. So he carries Excalibur. And I don't know if this is meant to be a call out to that because obviously they're not calling her Captain Britain, but, you know, neat to see that kind of legacy carried on.
Also, all in the game, the chat says the Soul Stone is on Vormir, not the Power Stone. Did you say Power
You're
Stone, Dan
right.
Gvozden?
Yes. Yes. The Soul Stone's
Dan,
there.
come on, man. Don't you? Where's your memory of where all the fake power rocks are in this universe, dude?
Yeah, you're right. But yes, because,
What
you
what
know,
what what is
Thanos.
what is in your memory instead of the location of the Soul Stone? Like, is it your wife's birthday or something like that? Get rid
Barely.
of that stuff, man. You don't need that in there.
Yeah, I should have known that because Thanos shows up inexplicably with the Power Stone at the start of Infinity War and beats up the Hulk. So I should have known that. That's true. And I did somewhere know that, but this is why we have the chat here to call us out.
Yeah. All right. So then there's a scene where she kind of goes into the. Oh no, that's not the right thing. So there's a scene where she goes into uh, into the
Big
portal,
blue
and
portal.
it's kind of. I have to say the staging is a little bit awkward, right? She's like just pushing this octopus slowly into it, and he's like, "But you owe me that dance," and she's like. You know, one day, and she's just like slowly shoving this octopus into the portal. It's like, it's a very different vibe than I think Steve Rogers like crash landing the thing into the Arctic or whatever he does, right?
Right.
And you know, like that, I don't know, just man or woman in ship about to crash into something. I feel like is a very kind of wistful thing. Woman stuffing octopus into portal just feels weird as like a goodbye, you know?
Yeah.
It's just like it's like have you ever seen someone try to get like pasta into a pot? You know, it just is like it's just like it's not a graceful activity. You know what I mean? Anyway,
I imagine that they're doing this to set up the character Shuma Gorath, which is like a giant space octopus.
mm-hmm.
If you've ever played the Marvel vs. Capcom games, it's a character that shows up there, but is like never in the comics. But there is a rumor that the character is going to show up in the next Doctor Strange movie. So I wonder if they're like seeding giant space octopus into this to kind of build some familiarity.
So she's brought into the future, and she sees Nick Fury and Hawkeye. And it's basically the same scene from, you know, what is it? The end of the post credit scene of First Avenger, if I recall correctly.
Right. Well, it's not the post credit scene, but yes.
Yeah, it's basically like you're in the future, and she's like, "What about Steve Rogers?" You know, and you know that's it. Cut to credits. So we get a little bit of the Watcher, and he's like, "I may never interfere," and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts on this episode? I think you think that ending is setting up future Captain Carter appearances, right?
I mean, they've outright said that they plan on revisiting that character. I don't know how many of these characters and scenarios they plan on revisiting from this season, but I think like they feel like they probably created something iconic in this character that they can continue to kind of mine, and I think there's probably something to that. Um, you know, for me, I'm not all that keen on revisiting What Ifs, unless it's a really interesting idea, because the appeal of this to me is just like new idea, new idea, new idea. Like, let's see
Yeah.
how many different iterations of this
Right.
we can get. But
Yeah.
if if they have a good story in mind, I don't necessarily mind it altogether.
It's
For
awesome.
me,
It's awesome to see Captain Carter kicking ass. I just hope that the next rendition we see of her is more than just her kicking ass. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if it was Captain Carter and she was kicking ass? Like that. That is about as far as this episode went for me emotionally. So
agreed.
it's not bad. It's not like it was bad in any way. It was just like a lot of opportunity to go deeper that they didn't take. So
As a formula for this kind of show, though, I think it's pretty neat, like how they can kind of, get past exposition quickly based on our knowledge of the
yes,
story. Like,
yeah,
I think that's really interesting, and like we said, I think the next two episodes are going to do that even more, in more exciting ways. And so, as a like first introduction, I thought this was okay. Like, I think if I wasn't invested in this property more, it's the kind of it's just as disposable as the comics. Like I wouldn't say this is essential viewing. Um, like I think our recap show is, David.
well, yeah. I mean, Dan Gvozden, yes, the show may not be essential viewing, but our show discussing it obviously is. I
Yeah,
mean,
of course.
duh.
We got our fingers on the pulse of
That's
culture.
how that works by the transitive property. That's how that works.
Right, right.
Uh, you had one other comment you wanted to make about the credits and the comics creators. Why don't you go into that before we wrap up?
Yeah, sure. So I just wanted to kind of note this because we've been talking about all these Marvel shows, and I think, as we continue, Dave, we're going to kind of be talking about Marvel and Disney as companies and things like that. Like, as we unpack what it is that they're creating. And I'm always going to be a strong proponent for the comics. Like that's kind of I feel like my role on the show is like if I can have one mantra like that I'm known for, it's like go read comics because I think they're a really great medium that's overlooked. And I think the people that create these comics are often overlooked. I mean, people tend to assume they know Stan Lee, they might know Jack Kirby or Steve Ditko, and maybe they keep up with the comics and they know a few other names. But the average audience is not, really all that tuned in to that world. And so at the end of the credits, they always list all the names of the people, or they try their best at least to list the names of the people that inspired the works, in the show. And I don't know if you experienced this, David, not to go on another tangent, but, going to the theaters to see Black Widow and Suicide Squad, they were giving out comics based on the movie now, which is something I've never seen them do before. And I think it's a practice they should continue doing. Did you have any experience with that? Did you go to see either of those movies in the theater?
No, but I've been to screenings before where they give out comics, so it's not a totally new thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's the first time I've ever seen it, but I thought that was really, really neat. But anyway, there was a revelation kind of this week. I think this has been kind of largely known, but I think it became very publicly known. Hollywood Reporter wrote about it too. We learned that like the comic creators that are listed in the credits, if they're alive even, are given basically like a $5,000 check that's kind of like a don't complain check and an invitation to the premiere of the movie. And I don't know. I think there needs to be a better way. I know that like part of the deal of writing for Marvel is that like you're a freelancer, right? They own all the creative rights to these things, and they've been trying to do a little bit better, giving payments to people when books are reprinted and stuff. But I think when you're making billions of dollars off of these properties, you can probably afford to give the people who are creating them more than maybe $5,000 for originating the idea or iterating on the idea in a way that is substantive to your creation. For example, Marvel doesn't really have health insurance for its comic creators. And one of their most famous creators is this guy named Bill Mantlo, who was the co-creator of Rocket Raccoon. And there is Guardians of the Galaxy making hundreds of millions of dollars in theaters, and he had to do a GoFundMe for like his health because he was in the hospital, like I believe he was in a coma for a while, and his brother was doing a GoFundMe for him. And just the disparity between, hey, I'm the guy that created that thing that's making hundreds of millions of dollars, and I can't even afford hospital bills, is kind of ugly. And I think even just from a PR perspective, like Disney and Marvel need to do a better job at rewarding these people that are basically building their legacy.
Completely agree, Dan. Thanks for bringing that up and raising awareness of that issue. And to the extent that people who are watching this can do so, demand better from Disney, demand better from Marvel. We will certainly keep calling them out on BS that we see,
Right.
regardless of what it is, and attracting a great deal of internet hate as a result. Couple things I want to mention before we wrap up today. First of all, as I mentioned at the beginning, if you are a subscriber to my Patreon at patreon.com/Dave Chen, you get a high-quality audio podcast version of this. And also, check out Dan Gvozden's other podcast, Amazing Spider Talk. If you want to hear more Spider-Man talk, check it out. I love doing these things live with you, Dan Gvozden, but it is highly likely that the next couple one of these we're going to do are not going to be live. We will instead just upload a video, and it will not be live because we gotta the scheduling is not going to work out to do them live. So I just wanted to warn people about that. It's not because we're not going to do them live anymore. It's just because scheduling wise, it's not going to work out. We actually love doing them live. We love the chat. We love the conversation. But the next couple ones is not going to happen. So just FYI, hopefully in September, we'll be back doing them live, and it should be fun. So just a big announcement there. So I think that's going to bring us to the end of this episode, Dan Gvozden. I said it would be a shorter episode. We went like 52 minutes, so we're just really long-winded. Like at this point, it's a parody, Dan, because this is so much longer than the actual episode itself. But
well, I think it's the first one of these, so we kind of spent time establishing what this is, and I think we can kind of go through it a bit quicker in the future. Like I apologize. Famous last words. Yeah.
All right, Dan Gvozden, thanks for chatting with me. You out there who are listening or watching this, thank you for doing that. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the Patreon if you enjoy this, and thanks. We'll see you in the next one.
Thanks.